I'm Paul Edwards, author of the Mourner's Woods books. Today I'm reading Quasimodo's Monster Magazine, issue number 5 from 1975. I thought some of you might enjoy flipping through this vintage magazine with me. Together, let's see what kinds of Monster Kid goodness is in here. Quasimodo's Monster Magazine. This issue has a cover story on Jekyll and Hyde through the years, and there have been a lot of movie versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We also get Space 1999, Heroes of the Horrors, The Laurie Story, Lee Majors, The $6 Million Man, but the article that interests me the most is The Master of Radio Horror, Hyman Brown, and the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. All right, let's get right to it. Oh boy, you can get 8 complete courses with free introduction booklet, only $9.95. Wow. All right. Jekyll and Hyde Through the Years, Heroes of the Horrors, The Master of Radio Horror, Lee Majors, Mini Monster posters. I think they spelled Minnie wrong there. They spelled Minnie like Minnie Mouse. I think they meant M-I-N-I. Oh, the Stepford Wives. All right. Whoa. Okay, so the 1931 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, starring Frederick March, is actually my favorite of the many versions of Jekyll and Hyde. There had been a silent Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde back in 1920, starring John Barrymore, grandfather of Drew Barrymore. Yes, really, look it up. Then there was this 1931 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was really good. Here's John Barrymore as the silent version, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's the one that's Drew Barrymore's grandfather. Check him out. Oh my gosh. Then the 1931 Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was really, really good. But what happened was, in 1941, they were making a new Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde starring Spencer Tracy, and they really, really wanted this to be the definitive version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So they basically brushed under the rug all traces of the 1931 Frederick March Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is a shame because it was really good. It was at least as good as the Spencer Tracy one. Oh, Heroes of the Horrors. Lon Chaney Sr., Lon Chaney Jr. I can't believe they didn't put him in his signature role as the Wolfman. Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, Vincent Price. Nice. The Man of 1,000 Faces, Lon Chaney Sr. He did all his own makeup effects, and he was astonishingly good at it. Bela Lugosi playing the mad scientist in The Devil Bat. Which one of these gorillas is Bela Lugosi? The caption says. I think we can tell. Boris Karloff in the 1932 version of The Mummy. Oh, behind the scenes with Karloff getting his Frankenstein monster makeup applied by Jack Pierce. This behind the scenes photograph sort of has a hidden humor to it, because in real life, Lon Chaney Jr.'s co-star, Evelyn Ankers, was really not that fond of him. The two of them had an argument about who had the better dressing room or the bigger dressing room or something. And I don't know who was at fault, but either way, they really didn't like each other from then on. But Hollywood kept casting them opposite each other, so they kept having to work together. So she probably did really want to throttle the Wolfman at some point. That's an awesome shot of Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman. The Old Dark House, of course, one of James Whale's best films. Oh. Yeah. Comedy of terrors, with a lot of the luminaries of horror cinema all appearing together in a sort of a farce, a horror comedy. And you had Boris Karloff, Peter Lorre, Vincent Price, John Carradine. And basically, Vincent Price and Peter Lorre played undertakers whose business was falling off, so they tried to generate new business for themselves as undertakers. Oh, this is the heroes of the horrors again. Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr., Boris Karloff playing Fu Manchu, Bela Lugosi, Peter Lorre, and a very, very messed up Vincent Price. Only in the past few years have I discovered horror radio shows, vintage horror radio shows, and there were a lot of them, so there's plenty of material out there. If you are a fan of vintage horror and you've seen all the movies for the umpteenth time and want more material, consider looking to horror radio shows, because there were a ton of them. There were big ones that were very well known, like The Inner Sanctum and Suspense. But for every one of those, there were a dozen other little ones that didn't last so long, but we still have the recordings of, like The Witch's Tale and The Whistler. So in the 1970s, there was a resurgence of interest in vintage radio, and the CBS Radio Mystery Theater was basically an attempt to revive and relive vintage radio horror shows. It started in, I think, 1974, and it ran for maybe 8 years or so. E.G. Marshall was the host, and it was good. They had really, and one advantage to these is, by this time, it was the 1970s and early 1980s, the sound quality was much better. You know, a lot of times when you listen to old-time radio shows, they're scratchy, and you know the sound quality is muffled, and some of them are almost painful to listen to. But the sound quality on these is all excellent. I almost breezed right by the X-ray specs. Better order a pair of those. This was from an ad introducing a week of Edgar Allan Poe stories that we're going to play on CBS Radio Mystery Theater. Herman Munster. Oh, this is the original host of Inner Sanctum. Rod Serling, we remember him best as the host of The Twilight Zone. He had tried to do a radio show, and it wasn't successful. So he wound up having a negative opinion of the whole format, which is a shame, because just because his didn't work out doesn't mean that the format is bad. Your favorite radio stations who feature CBS Radio Mystery Theater. Well, guess what? They probably don't feature it anymore. It ended, I think, in 1982. But, everything lives forever on the internet. You can still find all those great old shows on the internet. All right. So, in the 1970s, there was a superhero TV show called The $6 Million Man. And it was about an astronaut who had, after a terrible accident, he had received cybernetic substitute legs, one arm, and an eye. And this science called bionics made him a human-machine hybrid. And he was able to use his bionic powers as a government agent to help fight the force of evil. This show was very successful. It ran for 5 years. And it had a spin-off series, The Bionic Woman, which also was very successful and ran for 3 years. And here's a little trivia for you. If you already knew everything I just said, here's something you might not have known. At one point, The Bionic Woman was on a different network than the parent show, The $6 Million Man, but Oscar Goldman was in both series. So for a while, Oscar Goldman was the only fictional character to ever appear on 2 different competing TV networks with the same actor playing the same character at the same time. There. There's something you didn't know. All right. At one point, they released some action figures for this show. And the $6 Million Man, Steve Austin, his action figure sold well. And one of the big villains on the show was Bigfoot. And they had a Bigfoot action figure, and that sold really well. But there was also a Oscar Goldman action figure. Oscar Goldman was basically there for exposition. He was Steve Austin's boss. He would give him assignments and provide logistical backup for him. But he didn't have any special powers or anything. So hardly anyone bought the Oscar Goldman action figure. Well, guess what? That's worth a freaking fortune now, if you can find an Oscar Goldman action figure. If you ever want to collect something just for the monetary value, you don't get the main character. Everybody and his brother is going to buy the main character. You get the little side characters that nobody has any interest in. You get those action figures. Those are the ones that are going to end up being valuable. Well, you get mini, here they spelled mini right, mini monster posters. 4D Man, Attack of the Crab Monsters, The Man from Planet X, Edgar Ulmer Strikes Again, and of course, Planet of the Apes, because in the first half of the 1970s, this was the definitive science fiction franchise until Star Wars came out. So what you would do if you were a kid, you would just clip out these mini posters and tape them to your notebook or to your wall or something. And you had pictures of your favorite monsters. But you'd also be sacrificing whatever was on the other side of the page. And here, this is a really good shot from Son of Frankenstein of Boris Karloff as the monster and Bela Lugosi as Igor. So sometimes you would have a tough choice, which side of the page to cut out. Oh, Christopher Lee's Count Dracula. Oh, hey. Should we solve the crossword puzzle? Make the video too long. No, I am glad to see that we give equal time to the great horror actors and the great horror actresses. That's good. The Stepford Wives. So, some people don't like it when there's social or political commentary in their genre fiction, because genre fiction is supposed to be all about escapism. But really, I think The Stepford Wives was quite good. It was definitely a product of its times. It was a product of 1970s feminist ideals, and it really was good, though. It was a very effective horror movie. I think that, you can put your principles and your ideology into your book if you want. That's fine. It's just that your story still has to work even if we discard that element of it. That's what makes a difference. Otherwise, it's just preachy. But this movie was not preachy. This movie worked absolutely as just a straightforward horror movie. And was very effective. Unfortunately, it's one of these movies where, like Jaws, the original was great, then the first sequel was pretty bad, then the following sequels were abysmal. I guess I'm sort of assuming that you know what the Stepford Wives is. In case you've never heard of this property, basically what happens is, in a sleepy suburban town, some of the local housewives instantaneously become extremely submissive, compliant, and all about pleasing their husbands. And it seems that there's something sinister that is causing this drastic overnight change in the women. And in fact, there is something extremely drastic that is happening, and it's not good. Ugh. Once you know the secret of the Stepford Wives, it's so creepy looking at these. Ooh, Quasimodo's mailbag. Yeah, this is just hard to read. This is just an eyesore. The page is too crowded with words. Sorry. They're trying to fit in the names of a ton of kids who won Quasimodo monster posters, which must have been cheap to run off because the silent Hunchback of Notre Dame was in the public domain already, so it didn't cost them anything in terms of royalties. Space 1999 was a science fiction TV series that ran for 2 years. It was a British production. In the near future year of 1999, there was a city on the moon. There was a moon base up there, and a nuclear disaster caused the moon to break out of Earth's orbit and go flinging through outer space. And the people living on the moon city were in a day-to-day struggle to survive, and not only survive the isolation of being alone on the moon, but also the incredible number of suspiciously human-like aliens that they would continue to encounter. Remember when Christopher Lee did one? Christopher Lee. Yep. They had a lot of monsters on this show. I recently was rewatching this series, which I hadn't seen for years. And 2 things stood out to me. Number 1, it's really psychedelic. There's a whole lot of psychedelia in it. And number 2, there were really more monsters on this show than I remembered. There were quite a few monsters. Not every single episode, but a lot of them. Yeah, psychedelia. The Lori story, and no, you're not missing something. The page is missing something. A previous owner of this magazine cut this page out. That's what happened there. I cut something out of this page, I mean. Yeah, whatever was there. Must have been a small picture. I'm going to use this opportunity to correct something I said in a previous video, because when I make a mistake, I do want to correct it when I find it out. I previously said that Boris Karloff once said that he didn't like to make horror movies, he liked to make terror movies, and he liked to refer to his films as terror films, not horror films. I had the quote right, but I attributed it to the wrong person. That wasn't Boris Karloff who said that. That was Peter Lorre who said that. Peter Lorre, as told by his daughter, Peter Lorre is the one who said, I don't like the term horror movies. I think of my films as terror films. Congo Crossing. Wow. The face behind the mask. Mad Love. Mad Love is a lesser known 1935 horror film. If you are a vintage horror fan, you absolutely must see Mad Love. I'm not kidding. You have to see it. Mad Love, 1935, starring Peter Lorre. It's creepy. It's basically a retelling of The Hands of Orlac. That's what it is. Oh. And here, just in case you think you might have missed some of Peter Lorre's work, they have his whole filmography. Because when this came out in the 1970s, you couldn't Google what movies was Peter Lorre in. You had to hope that a magazine like this would print it at some point. And when they did, you would hang on to this for dear life so that you could refer to it in years to come. Yeah, this is one of these gags a lot of monster magazines had, where they would print a real image from a monster movie with a joke caption, like, "Oh, gross, I can't stand the sight of blood. Now I told you to stay home, Junior." Yeah, it's just on and on like this. This one we don't get. Mercifully, we're spared this one because it's faded out over the years. Oh, no, there's more. All right, that's a little funny. This one is a little funny. "No thanks, coffee keeps me awake." That's a little funny. That's all right. Yeah. Oh, here's the answers to those crossword puzzles that we saw earlier. Ooh, next issue. You get Karloff, William Shatner on Star Trek. Nice. The Story of Hammer Films. Ooh. I had the Enterprise bridge model, and I had the Enterprise model. And I had the Klingon ship, but I did not have the Romulan ship or the Galileo. And I know a lot of kids had this. I didn't. I missed out on this. Bloody bargains. Wow. We were talking about old radio shows earlier. In the 70s, they repackaged some of these old radio shows onto vinyl albums and sold them to kids. So here's, for instance, The Shadow. This is, my guess would be 2 episodes of The Shadow, one on each side of a vinyl LP. Superman had a radio show. Green Hornet, Flash Gordon. Suspense was a very famous horror radio show. So you get a couple of Suspense episodes that Bela Lugosi did. So those would make pretty good purchases in the 1970s. You knew who these people were, but you didn't. Their radio shows were not on the air anymore. So that was actually worth buying. These Mego figures, we loved these. I had some of them. For some weird reason, the only one that I have that's in reasonably good condition of all the characters here is Mr. Mxyzptlk from Superman. I don't know why. I had the big name superheroes. Of course, Planet of the Apes gets its own line. All right, so what should we send away for here? We can only order this many? Oh. Who is going to buy perfume by mail order out of the back of a monster magazine? Read the room. This is not your target audience for perfume sales. Iron-ons for t-shirts. All right, that was pretty good. If you enjoy vintage horror and classic monsters, you would love my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I'm self-published on Amazon. I've written a series of novels that all take place in a haunted forest, Mourner's Woods. And in each book, a completely new cast of characters enters this forbidden wilderness where they find ghosts, monsters, other supernatural horrors, but invariably the worst danger that any character faces is the friends who hiked here with them. My name again is Paul Edwards. My books are the Mourner's Woods books. Thanks for sharing some time with me looking through Quasimodo's Monster Magazine. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.